Wonderful. All right, everyone, thank you so much for joining Build Up California's August 2024 network meeting. My name is Samantha Payton. I'm a policy and program officer at the Low Income Investment Fund, and I spent a lot of my time on our Build Up California initiative, which is a collaborative network dedicated to the equitable expansion, improvement, and sustainability of early learning and care facilities in the state of California. Today, I'm really excited. We're hosting a panel discussion to learn how one city in California, Redwood City, has incorporated childcare into their city's planning and future development. I'm especially excited about this meeting because I am a Redwood City native. I attended my own childcare in Redwood City as well as my K through 12 education. I am going to be our host today, but I'm also joined by Esmeralda Martin Singh, who you may have seen at other Build Up meetings. She's back from maternity leave, which we're really excited about. She'll be in the Spanish language room and will be monitoring the chat if you experience any difficulties with interpretation, or if you have any questions, she will be monitoring there. So to kick things off, please put your name and your organization in the chat, and also include an emoji about how you're feeling about the end of summer and the start of fall. Just want to see who's in the room. Make sure when you're using the chat, if you want your entire message to be seen, that you're selecting everyone so that everyone can see and it's not just sent to one individual person. Hi, everyone. Some people are sad summer's leaving. I don't relate to that. I'm excited for fall. Wonderful. I think Esmeralda sent a photo of her new son. Thank you. Wonderful. Thanks everyone for sharing. I'm going to keep us moving along. This is our agenda for today. We just went over some intro and housekeeping items. The second portion is going to be a couple slides that set up where Redwood City is, what's the demographics of the area, and then a couple introduction slides that our panelists are going to help with to set the stage for how Redwood City has tackled their childcare supply in their work. And then the bulk of the meeting is going to be a panel. If you have questions for panelists, please feel free to put them in the chat. If they're relevant to what we're talking about at the moment, I'll try to bring them in a timely way, but rest assured that there's going to be a dedicated Q&A section towards the end of the call where we can have free Q&A with our panelists. At the very end, as always, we take a couple minutes to wrap up and then ask that you take one of our exit surveys so that we can learn how we can improve these network meetings in the future months. So one setup slide about what Redwood City is, where Redwood City is. It is on the San Francisco Bay Peninsula. It's about equidistant between San Francisco and San Jose. As of 2020, in the most recent census, there were a little over 83,000 people, making up nearly 3,000 households. These population numbers are from our most recent census, but Redwood City has gone through some very big population changes in the past 20 years as the tech industry has moved in from both the north and southern parts of the peninsula. As you can see in that bar chart on the top right, Redwood City now has a lot of high earners in the area. But there's still many low and middle class families that reside in Redwood City. So in that blue square, you can see the race and ethnicity data that was reported in the most recent census. Over a third of residents identify as Hispanic or Latino, and of census respondents that identifies as non-Hispanic, 60% were white, 20% Asian, 4% Native American, 3% Black, 1% Native Hawaiian, but 26% of folks still selected other as their racial identity. So the data below is from the San Mateo County Child Care Needs Assessment. In that report, every city in San Mateo County got a city profile page. Esmeralda is going to link the Redwood City profile page in the chat for your reference. So as of 2022, there were 7,623 children under the age of 5. Around 22% of those children qualify for subsidies, but at the time of this report, only 34% of that need was met. So you can see on the table on the left, it shows the total number of spaces, childcare spaces for these children. There's a total of about 7,000 childcare seats, but we can see that only 8 of those spaces are for infants and toddlers as of 2022. So we'll learn that infant toddler spaces are now a major focus of Redwood City's childcare supply building. This is an incredibly quick snapshot, but I hope it provides like a partial picture of who lives in Redwood City and the childcare landscape to set up our conversation. So with that, enough of me talking. I'm going to introduce our speakers. Esmeralda, if you wouldn't mind spotlighting us so everyone can see our faces. So first, I'm going to introduce Kristen Anderson. Kristen is a childcare planning and policy consultant who develops childcare policies and strategies for public and private agencies. As the former childcare coordinator of Redwood City, for over 25 years, she facilitated supply building and quality improvements in community childcare and early education programs and facilities. She is involved with state and local policy, particularly related to land use policy and facilities planning and development. She published a book, Planning for Childcare in California, which I can personally vouch for is a really, really formative text for this work. I reference it all the time. And she helped found Build Up San Mateo County, which Build Up California is modeled after at the state level. So thank you so much, Kristen, for joining us. Next, Shelley Major. Shelley's an experienced nonprofit executive and former elected official and is currently the ECE Vice President of Advisory and State Policy for the Low Income Investment Fund. She's one of my favorite bosses. Shelley served on Redwood City City Council for 5 years, including as vice mayor, spearheading efforts to raise the minimum wage, increase childcare facilities, and affordable housing. Prior to the city council, she served on the Redwood City School Board for 10 years, including 2 terms as board president. Thank you so much, Shelley, for being here. Lastly, but not least, Apollo Rojas is our final panelist. Apollo is a senior planner serving the city of Redwood City for the past 10 years. He has worked on planning policy, including updates to the city's childcare ordinance, accessory dwelling unit ordinance, and the housing element, which is the city's housing plan for the next 8 years. He has served as the staff liaison for the city's Architecture Advisory Committee and managed the city's summer planning internship program. Currently, his biggest project is keeping up with his energetic 20-month-old baby girl. So rest assured, Apollo has a couple reasons to be interested in this work. Thank you, Apollo, for joining us. Thank you to all of our panelists for joining us. And I'm going to pass it over to Kristen to help with another introduction slide. Tell us a little bit about Redwood City's story.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So our planning efforts in Redwood City actually started back in the 1980s with when the school board members were alarmed about the situation of latchkey kids hanging around on school sites after school. And we formed a consortium and eventually hired staff to work on that need, including getting portables put on a few school sites and programs started on those sites. Our first child care policy was adopted in 1990 and looked at the various roles the city would play in terms of funding, providing space, providing the coordination role, doing direct service programs. And then after that, we have been implementing strategies in conjunction with community providers and partners to maximize the use of city and community resources, all the land, buildings, and funding that we could put toward this, and to be ready and capture new funding and resources when they became available. We also worked on adopting supportive policies and practices on the city level, which Apollo will talk more about. And we supported community providers, both family child care and centers, to be successful. So providing an extensive website with startup information and resources, a level of technical assistance that the R&R does not have the capacity to do with 21 cities in our county. And so that's the background.
I think this is me, right, Sam?
Yeah.
Thanks, Kristen. Every time I see the history of Redwood City, I'm just reminded about the incredible work that has been done over the years, and understanding that it started in the 80s really shows, I think, for all of us to understand how much effort it took. And, I met Kristen when I was on the school board, so that was a long time ago. And she had already been working on it for a long time. So I'd say that just to say, like, if you're working on this in your city, don't be discouraged. We had a person who was dedicated to this work. She was great at building partnerships across the city and across the county. And it still takes time to really fully realize the promise of what cities can do to build the supply of childcare. But I do want to start by saying thank you to Kristen for making it possible for all of us who wanted to work on it later on, for us to have some modicum of success. So when I think about the childcare story, we were talking about this last week, and we have people, places, and programs here, but I would also add policy. And Kristen talked about the policy adoptions that have happened over the years. So there is a wide variety of ways that cities can think about providing services and supports to providers, about the way they can support childcare programs. I think we'll get into some further details probably in the discussion, but it takes partners as well. So that's another P for this slide, to really make that possible. And then Apollo will talk specifically about land use and other policies, but it was something I learned a lot more about in serving as a council member, because I really started to understand how policies that may seem innocuous can really inhibit building the supply of childcare. There's zoning for one thing, but there's also fees. And then just even processes that happen at the city can make it difficult to figure out, if you want to expand or build, what is possible. So that's why this next piece around informed and engaged city staff was really important. Kristen serves as a navigator for providers. She also talked about the website. But because of Redwood City's focus on building the supply of childcare, our staff were super engaged. They knew it was a priority of the council. What the council did in, I think 2016, we set a strategic plan. And in that plan, we had children, youth, and families really inspired by seeing a report on the lack of supply of childcare in the city and thinking about what could we do. So we talked about it from a council perspective. We had our planning commission talk about it. Everybody knew that it was a priority for the council to really think about what we could do as a city to build the supply of childcare. And then I'll just say the last thing about that was a time. So you saw the census data from 2022. I think you had, Sam, right? Where the population was 85,000. So just a few years ago, I would say about maybe 10 years ago, if you drove into Redwood City, you would see the population sign said 75,000. So Redwood City has experienced very rapid growth, huge number of new housing units. And developers, it is a place that developers wanted to come both from an office development perspective and from a housing development perspective. What the developers heard from the council is, we care about childcare. We want to increase the supply of childcare. And we expect projects that come before us to have some acknowledgement of this desire and have some commitment to helping us increase the supply of childcare. So that's what we saw. Great partner. I think I saw that Christine Padilla from Build Up San Mateo County is on here, a great partner in Build Up San Mateo County, who then worked with developers from a technical perspective to help them understand how to bring projects to the council that could include childcare. So I think I'll stop there and turn it over to you, Apollo.
Yeah, thanks, Shelley. I mean, great points made by Kristen and Shelley about the history we've been, and we're finally seeing some of that come into fruition. This table right here breaks down some of the what I'll call pipeline projects of things that are just recently built, things that are currently under construction, and things that are under review, meaning the city's still processing the application. I think most notable, most successful, something that the city really loves to highlight is a project that we have on Bradford Street. It's a 100% affordable senior housing residential building with childcare on the bottom. So it's a nice intergenerational type of use that mixes both some of our older, more mature residents with some of our brand new, fresh residents. And some of the idea was to partner with the private sector or nonprofit sector. This was something the city owned land that they partnered with Mid-Penn Housing to help develop. Some of these numbers here, they're approximates. So that one's around 8,000 square feet. That was completed back in 2021. And now we have a couple of new ones under construction right now. Broadway Plaza, a little bit outside of downtown. That's planning to have 70 children there, as well as another larger development that everyone can see if they're passing by, El Camino Real, which would also house more children. And actually, we had recently, this one was in the news for unfortunate circumstances. There's a affordable housing project in North Fair Oaks that had two buildings. One of those buildings actually burned down in a fire. Fortunately, as fortunate as something like that can be, the building that burned down was not the building that had the childcare. And we have a couple of more projects in the pipeline that are under review that are incorporating childcare. One of the unique ones is near Whipple and Arguello. There's a couple of historic homes that are there that they're looking to convert to add as a childcare home. So they'd be a popular term in planning is adaptive reuse. They'd be reusing these existing structures from old single-family homes to now childcare centers, and there's some construction that needs to go with this. So that's sort of what's happening right now. Well, how did it happen? I think it's from setting the table from council, having that supportive planning commission and city council with a vision to say, hey, here are our priorities of the city. Their housing, their ease of transportation, and their children and youth. Not on this list, we actually have a development right now that's proposing a teen center within it. So, all levels of our youth are included. And we get a lot from developers, the question of, what does the city want to see? What can we provide to sort of incentivize development happening here? And really giving them clear direction on what your priorities are in the city, I think is very helpful. The earlier you can get it to them, the more they can incorporate it into their design from stage one. The later you tell these developers to incorporate something, the more their design is already built out, and they just try to squeeze it in instead of making a more holistic effort to make it as part of the design of the project. And another thing we do here is try not to, overregulate. The state has very specific standards on the number of children that can be placed there based on the square footage, number of workers based on number of children, amount of open space based on number of children. So making sure that our current zoning standards don't conflict with those existing standards or pose some sort of unnecessary burden where now you're trying to meet both city regulations and state regulations and safety, building and fire code. So, I mean, a lot of issues that we've seen in people trying to expand to existing sites. These are all brand new sites, right? People trying to go to existing sites. Usually they're on the market because they're a little older. They need to have improvements done, and usually the owner is unwilling to pay for it. So a child care center is much less likely to be able to afford the type of improvements such as fire sprinklers, utility upgrades, ADA, or American Disability Act upgrades. That means making new pathways and doors. They might not be able to afford that same type of upgrade as, let's say, a commercial office. So it's really just trying to level the playing field, add as much flexibility as possible, and giving these childcare centers a chance to go into new areas.
Thank you, Apollo, and thank you, Shelley and Kristen, for helping set the stage. I'm going to stop sharing so that we can see all of each other and get started with our panel. My first question is broad because there's a lot of different folks on this call. Some are providers, some are working in city governments. So I want to start with a broad question. I'll send it to Kristen first. What is the city government's role in expanding the supply of childcare?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, we did look at all of the roles the city could play. And there is no state mandated role, as people probably are aware, which there is for housing production. And so it's really up to the cities. And because cities are responsible for envisioning what their communities are going to look like as livable and healthy communities for all residents and workers, they have the authority over local land use, and which has significant impact on where and how facilities are developed. So I think that's the major role in terms of expanding the supply and removing barriers in local requirements and processes is the best first step, because there are a lot of operators out there who could be wanting to open new programs, either centers that want additional sites or to expand their site, or family child care providers who would like to open a center. And so getting out of the way or streamlining those are most critical.
Thank you. And Shelley, do you have a slightly different perspective as a former city council member?
I mean, yes and no. I think, Kristen's point is like kind of getting out of the way. We've mentioned a few times land use policies. So let's, we could talk about a specific one that the state finally took action on because cities weren't doing it. Not Redwood City, but other cities, which is SB 234, the Keeping Kids Close to Home Act, which allows family child care by right in residential areas. And if you're not a city planner and you don't know what by right means, it just means basically it's an administrative process. You don't have to get specific approvals. That law also disallowed cities from charging extra fees to family child care when they went in to apply for permits. And so when you add up all the different kinds of costs that it takes to start up a child care and or expand, they can be significant, as you either know from personal experience or might imagine. And then when you add on like all kinds of fees that cities charge for good reasons, in many cases, business license fees, permitting fees, etc., they can really add up. And for everyone who knows the delicate balance that childcare providers have in their budgets, that can just kind of tip them over the edge and not make it possible. One thing I just want to make a note of is, I talked a lot about what has happened. Apollo showed you what the result is of having had that focus. But I just really want to say a quick shout out to the current council, which has continued that focus. I mean, I've been off council for 4 years now, but the current council has continued that focus on childcare. And you can see it coming to fruition. A lot of those projects Apollo showed you, a couple of them are projects that we either approved when I was on council or were in process to be approved. So the city staff and council have kept things moving over time for this very slow process of continuing to build the supply and meet the needs of communities. Oh, thank
Thanks,
you, Lori,
Shelley.
for putting info on SB 234 in the chat.
I was about to say thank you. And yeah, the Child Care Law Center has a lot of really good resources on that. Thank you both, Shelley and Kristen. My next question is for Apollo, just because you're wearing a different hat. What's the role of a city planner in this work? What sort of regulations and policies inform your role in this?
Yeah, I think that, whenever you're looking at the child care providers, they're coming in here with a fresh blank slate. They're not developers. They're not doing this for several different projects. This might be the only new child care center they're opening, and a lot of times they're operating out of their homes. So you want to make things easy as possible, clear information, clear handouts, good communication internally between departments. We're fortunate enough to have Kristen at one point as our child care coordinator. So that's a single point of contact that people can go to, and that helps facilitate everything else. From a planning perspective, what we regulate is zoning, and that's governed by the general plan. We made child care updates back in 2021. I was very fortunate to be sitting on opportunity, basically, right place, right time. As we all remember, we had a pandemic, so that slowed down development and allowed staff to work on some other things, including policy. So, you have to kind of go back and see what the existing policies are and how that can inform changes you want to make. The other opportunity here, SB 234, this changed the state law for large family childcare homes. Previously required use permits way back when, if a neighbor complained. We found that to be a very unproductive process that took a lot of time on staff's end, a lot of effort and money on child care center's end, and wanted a way to streamline that. This was a perfect opportunity. Hey, while we're in there updating the zoning for this, why don't we look at child care at home as a whole? So we took a look at our policies. As Shelley mentioned, we had strategic priorities about children and youth. Great. That's another way to back this up. And then we looked at our general plan. We actually had existing general plan guidelines and policies that said we should allow childcare by right for centers for up to 24 kids. But the next step had not been taken yet. And that was done in 2010 to change the zoning to reflect that. Working as a city, there's limited staffing, there's limited agenda times on city council. It's really hard to change the zoning ordinance, even for a supportive plan commission and city council. Other cities' staff might not have as much support and might have a constituency or residents in the public that might not be as supportive. So using that general plan policy to already update this, it really gave us more leeway to reach bigger. So we made a childcare by right for, or like Shelley said, then it's just permitted, allowed. You don't need a public hearing, you don't need a use permit for up to 60 children, because we saw that the numbers cited in the general plan were sort of outdated, and so that we kind of stretched those out to be a little bit more accommodating to a bigger number. And then we actually, this past Monday, we had our city council second reading of a zoning update to allow childcare centers by right in all mixed use districts. So the no use permit for the size, and that would be going into effect next month, September 26th. So it's something, even though we made changes that we thought were very beneficial, that's just one stop. There's still continued progress that needs to be made. So that's just an example of, we had opportunity, we had existing goals, and we made sure to take advantage of them.
Thank you. And Kristen, did you want to chime in on that answer? I saw your hand raised.
Oh, well, I did that by accident, but I am amused at hearing Apollo's update about the recent meeting, because back in the day, I remember many times where I would go and sit in the back of the council chambers, and when council members saw me, then the child care issue was raised. And over the years, I didn't need to come, and the council would be raising the issues themselves. And then I hear like this, oh, this went through last week. So I'm really proud of the staff and the council for continuing.
Well, I wanted to ask you, because Apollo mentioned it at the beginning of his answer, Redwood City had a dedicated childcare coordinator, which is a pretty unique position to have. How did that impact the progress that was made compared to a city, for example, that doesn't have a childcare coordinator?
Well, and unfortunately, about, I don't know, many years ago, most of the large cities in California had child care coordinator positions, and they're very few now. And so we were lucky to maintain even a half-time position. But I think it was very unique and very critical in persistently tracking all the resources and connecting providers with new funding, with new sites that became available, and supporting them in other ways, having the relationships with approximately 40 centers and 100 plus family child care, to be there to provide deeper technical assistance or referrals or whatever. I know there were a few critical times where making the connection made projects happen that would not have happened at all. And back in my early days, I literally would drive around the city and look at all the church properties and the school sites and any vacant lots and try to figure out what we might use. And then at one point, our Head Start agency had got new money and they were looking for property. And so I said, oh, go look at St. Anthony's Church. They have a huge property back there. And so they were able to install a number of portables that are still there. It's one of their biggest sites in the county. Another time the state made available the CalSafe teen parent money, and the only high school district in our county that was eligible because of the teen birth rates we were the only eligible ones to apply, and the high school district did not have the capacity or understand how important or how they would apply for this funding. And so I contacted all the very few operators in our county who do subsidized infant toddler care, which is what this was for. And none of them was interested. So I went out of the county and located a provider who actually wrote the application for them, got the CDBG money to install the portables at the continuation high school. So even though CalSafe money went away, eventually there's still a building there that a different operator is using. So those kind of connections being embedded in the community and really tracking being on all the mailing lists and knowing which programs are eligible, which are nonprofits, for-profits, who's interested in expanding. All of those things are what were important to keep up with.
Thank you. Yeah, a big job certainly takes a dedicated staffer to tackle that. My next question is for Shelley, because as a former city council member, you had a lot of different policy priorities to manage, not exclusively childcare. So I'm curious how you were able to connect the issue of childcare to other priorities, maybe economic development, housing, things like that.
Yeah, well, I can speak from just my personal point of view, which is obviously a bit biased because now I work in childcare. Um, when I was elected, I had a priority for maintaining a diverse community. I talked earlier about the rapid growth of the city, and Redwood City, as you may have gleaned, had historically been pretty diverse, both economically and racially and ethnically. And my concern was that we were able to maintain that in some way. And so the way I thought about it was kind of like a three-legged stool of maintaining economic diversity. One of them was wages. And so as a council, we worked on with staff on raising the minimum wage faster than the state. The other one was affordable housing. Redwood City had built a lot of housing, as I alluded to. Apollo, I think we built like 8,000 units in like 7 years or something, right? Something crazy. And the majority of the housing that was built, just for a variety of reasons, was market rate housing. It wasn't affordable. And so, like many cities, most cities across the state, we had a lack of affordable housing. And so thinking about, what do people need? They need wages to pay their rent. They need rent to be affordable. And for families, they need a safe place to have their children cared for so they can go to work and pay their rent. So for me, that's how I sort of brought all those pieces together. And then as a city, we could then think about what else did we need to do and build on sort of every council member's priorities. But for me, that's how I put the pieces together. Can I just ask though, because I think one thing that's important, I think interesting about Redwood City, we talk a lot about, and Apollo showed some projects where you include childcare in either mixed use development or housing. He showed you the project that, at least you saw the numbers for the project that was senior housing, affordable senior housing with childcare on the bottom. But Redwood City had a project well before that that's right next to City Hall. It's affordable housing with childcare on the ground floor. And I don't actually know the answer to this truly. So, Kristen, what year did that happen? Because I feel like that was pretty unique at that time for a city the size of Redwood City.
Oh, good, Amanda. So I was going to
Thanks,
say,
Amanda.
I was going to say it was at least 25 years ago. Because it was funded by redevelopment money. So the challenge we've had a challenge with that center that we learned from, in that the developer can get the tax credits by just including even a single classroom. So that one only has one classroom, which is not very sustainable for most operators. And we've had at least 3 operators in there. Head Start's actually going to open a classroom there now because it's been vacant for a while.
Yeah, thanks. I just was thinking that, there's a history of that in the city.
Yes.
So sorry, Samantha, I took us off track there.
No, if I could also add to it. Yeah, I mean, I think as we all saw during the pandemic, as children were being at home with us, it's a major economic development issue. If people have to look after their children, they can't go out and work in the same manner that they usually would be able to. And so I think it really drove home, especially this being reviewed at that time, that this wasn't this was a very multifaceted issue. And if you want to just look at it from like a business perspective and be cold and hard and calculating about it, it's very important from that perspective too. Yeah, and then as far as mentioning design, that's another reason why you want to get this in early with developers and tell them to hire professionals in the field. Developers are going to want to do things very quickly. They're going to want to do things very efficiently and cost effectively. That doesn't always work when you're trying to design a good, usable space that has meets all the regulations and it's just good for children. I think one of the things we run into the most is outdoor space for existing sites and just limited outdoor space. People want to place kids in the parking lot at times. We have to say, hey, let's work on this together. So I think that's another reason why this is economically driven, with the existing development and with new development.
Yeah, Apollo, I'm really glad you brought up the economic development component of it. Because a lot of times what we see, we do work across the country, and a lot of times what we see is rapidly developing areas. So they've created this whole plan for how to attract new businesses, new people, new workers. And then they realize, oh, we don't have any childcare. Oh, and actually we might not have housing either. So thinking about what do people need to go to work is a critical component. And to your point, yes, there's lots of reasons why we need good childcare. And I probably, most of the advocates on this call could rattle through all of them. But in addition to that, for a strong economy and for a diverse economy, building childcare into your economic development plan, building childcare into your housing plans, into your general plans, all of those pieces help create that sort of web of support and strength, not just for families, but for a whole community.
Thanks, everyone. You guys are kind of getting on my final batch of questions, and I want to keep moving forward so we have some time for Q&A. But now that we've touched on the many different entry points to this work, like how cities can actually make changes to increase the supply of their childcare, what's next? Like, what can parents, providers, advocates do with this information? And which avenues should they pursue? Are they at the city level? Are they trying to make a case to their local elected official? Are they talking to their city government agencies? Is there a nonprofit avenue? Like, what's the next step that a lay person could take in this work? I'll open it to the panel. Yeah, Kristen, please.
Well, I think one thing we want to acknowledge is there may be people on this call who are not in densely populated areas that are supporting huge development projects and need centers of 70 to 100 children. There are a lot of rural areas, less dense counties around the state, and there are a lot of baby steps in a number of areas that we've alluded to. And one is to educate people. Use your local planning council childcare data. Try to get city level data because that is more interesting to your city folks. Do things like inviting, get together with other providers and hosting visits so that people get to know what childcare is. Many people who are interested in this issue have never been in good quality programs, don't know what that's about. And then we also talked about getting input in early. So signing up for city email lists where you would hear about policy changes coming up or new developments that are in the works that often take years in the planning process when the developers do outreach. And that's the time, as Apollo said, to get in there and say, where's the childcare? Remember us and we can help you. And then asking your city, making sure, first of all, that they've updated their zoning code related to family childcare, because I've done work around the state and there's so many cities and counties that still have not updated that code almost 5 years after the law went into effect. and then encourage them to look at streamlining of their policies. And we have a lot of best practices documents we can share with people if they want ideas.
Yeah, maybe I can just piggyback on that. So I'm going to start with what Kristen noted about many cities across the state not complying with the family child care by right. We just did a survey in one county. It hasn't been released yet, so I can't tell you what county, but about a quarter of the cities have not updated their codes to comply with state law. We're going to be doing a survey in another county. A lot of the first fives are interested in this work. And then, once then, and sometimes cities didn't realize that they should have done this. And so sometimes they just need a little bit of help. I think I saw somebody on this from San Diego, but San Diego went beyond just complying with that law and created a requirement for anybody who's renting out, who's a landlord, to notify potential tenants that they have the right to operate family child care within their rental. So there's you can comply with the law and you can go beyond to really make a difference. And then another piece that I will say, I think all that the advocacy is important, but also think about who's getting elected, who's sitting there and making the final decisions on a lot of this work, and who's setting the direction, who's aligning their budget. That's what councils do. So this is an election year. I'm not telling you who to vote for, but please, yeah, that's right, Muran. Councilmember Campillo did listen. But please ask people, pay attention to who's running for your city council. It's really important. Ask them their views on childcare. Go to a forum. Most cities, even smaller cities, will have forums when there are contested council races. This is a year when council races should be happening. And really try and understand and be ready to present them with information. Reach out to us if we can help provide you with additional information on the economic value of providing childcare, the needs of providers. We're happy to provide information about what cities can do related to childcare. So you can share that with candidates and with your council members and with city staff.
Yeah, and I would say that at all levels, right? City, county, state, because some of the funding comes from some areas, depending on where you live, different jurisdiction might be in charge. So I think that's good advice as well.
Thank you, everyone. We have a few minutes left, so I want to officially open the floor to questions. We have one in the Q&A feature, so I'm going to read it out loud. It's from Erica. Thank you, Erica, for asking this question. Has Redwood City explored the model of family childcare pods or hubs? We've talked a lot about centers, but I think this is an interesting question about family childcare.
No, I was looking at that question. Could you help, can anybody help define that a little bit better for me?
Kristen, did you?
I don't
think
know
I can bring
what
Erica.
odds you're referring to.
Yeah, Erica, do you mind if I bring you off mute? Would you be okay speaking?
Sure. Can
Thank
you
you.
hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Apollo, like childcare pods, they are in different states. I don't know in California if it's something that is according to licensing, but family childcare pod is when you have different childcare providers, family childcare providers in one location, like each one with their own room or on their own unit. And so you save resources, right? They share resources because it's one facility, and sometimes cities and counties, they sponsor the facility, right? So let's say Redwood City has the facility available, one building available, and then adapts for family childcare providers to share that space. Or in other states, you have different, the city builds different housing units in one location. for family childcare providers. So that's the family childcare pod or hub.
You know, I don't think we've really explored that too much. I'm definitely going to pick Kristen's brain after this to kind of discuss that a little further online. But I tell you what, I would love to see, you know, there's a lot of energy in terms of housing, in terms of ADUs. One of the things that they're doing, different counties are developing different ADU resource centers where multiple cities can have a single website and a single county where you can see, hey, these are all the designs of an ADU. Something similar where cities across the county can really highlight the childcare providers that they have. You know, us on our internal website, we do have an interactive map, redwoodcity.org/childcare, if you want to take a visit. And then, you know, there's links to different resources, including our map. And, you know, it shows the different providers in the area. Something like that countywide would be great because, you know, we all don't work, live, and in the same area. You know, one of the things that we analyzed as traffic was a big concern for childcare centers. Childcare centers aren't like a unique new trip. You don't go home, or most people, you know, maybe it's changed for remote work. You don't go from home to childcare and then back home. It's usually you go from home, childcare center, to work, the grocery store, the gas station, back to the childcare center, pick up the kid, and come back home. So it's what they call a pass-through trip. It's not a unique situation. So yeah, I would love to see some sort of regional shared resource as it's a shared problem.
Thank you, panelists.
Thank you.
And thank you, Erica, for being willing to come off mute. Thank you. I see another question in the chat from Tessie. Is there a reason why FCC educators were not made an automatic part of this? I've heard about centers, but I'm not hearing FCC very often. Do you mean this webinar, or are you talking about SB 234? Tessie, would do you want to come off mute and clarify, or has your question been answered?
Sorry, I'm in the middle of the music lessons. I was listening to some of the stuff that you guys were saying with Redwood, and I hear the mention of like centers and stuff and everything, but I don't hear a lot about family childcare and how they were included. Were they included? And I may have missed it.
Yeah, let me touch on that a little bit. Oh, yeah, sure. Let me touch on that. Yeah, they definitely were. About family childcare centers were permitted by right in Redwood City for the smaller centers. And then with that state bill, the larger centers had to be now allowed by right up to 14 children, depending on how you divide it. So yeah, that was one of the key ones that we updated, as well as allowing childcare centers in residential areas. Previously, we didn't even allow that. So if someone wanted to convert their home, for example, to not be half living, half family care home, be 100% childcare, they could do that now. And there was a process for that. So I think that was the trigger for everything, is the state bill being updated to allow those large care homes by right that we definitely want to support and allow.
Thank you. And this is going to be our last question. It's a big one. I hope it can be answered maybe in a minute. What kind of financing was used for, or is used for, childcare centers that are co-located with affordable housing?
I mean, it's a mix, depending on the developer. So the nonprofit developer that we mentioned that has 100% senior housing, I don't know, Apollo, or Kristen, if we know the mix of financing that they used. But some of the other ones that Apollo showed you where it was a mixed use development, so it's housing. So Broadway Plaza is one that he mentioned. That project is market rate housing, affordable housing, office space, retail, and childcare. So that mix, and that's a for-profit developer. So that mix of funding is going to be a bit different than what, for example, Mid-Peninsula Housing, which is a nonprofit developer, used. Paula, do you have, or Kristen, I don't know if you guys have anything to add.
Well, affordable housing developments always have to layer about a dozen sources of city and county and state and federal HUD money and low-income housing tax credits and a lot of things to put it together.
That's right.
Yeah, I don't have
Molly,
a clear answer, but Sam, if you get their contact info, we can get back to them, maybe do a little research on our end.
I was going to say, Lily, we can get in touch with you and help clarify some of those projects in Redwood City. We are about out of time. So I wanted to thank all of our panelists for being here. Thank you so, so much for sharing and elevating the story of Redwood City. Esmeralda is going to put our exit survey in the chat. Please enjoy this photo of me at my Redwood City Child Care Center. I'm in the red. I still know all of these young ladies. The survey really, really helps us improve these network meetings and make them responsive to the needs of our network. So please take it. And one more big thank you to all of our panelists, Apollo, Kristen, and Shelley. Thank you so much for joining us and for all the work you've done in Redwood City. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Great photo.